What does Patrick Mahomes, Derrick Henry, and new Clemson commit Sammy Brown all have in common? We'll tell you. And speaking of the Tigers, does this five-star week mean that we have to reset our expectations of Dabo Swinney? We're going to Death Valley to find out. Plus, we're also going back to school. Cooper Petagna has grades for the ACC, and let me tell you, he's a tough grader. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair and Gulo, I am Emily Proud. A reminder to submit your questions in the chat. The only way you can do that is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. The chat is a fun place to be already. I see fans of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Does not matter who you are a fan of. Go ahead and hit that like button so we know that you're watching. We, meanwhile, are watching all the fallout from the official visit season. And Blair, the headlines just keep on coming.
It was a huge weekend for the likes of USC, Clemson, and Georgia. Emily, who's going to step up to the plate this coming weekend? Who's going to have the biggest weekend in college football recruiting?
Looking forward to it. Let's recap what happened in the recruiting world with some headlines. A name I know you've heard once or twice this week is back in the news. Sammy Brown was named Max Prep's Male National Athlete of the Year. The #1 linebacker committed to Clemson earlier this week. And speaking of names, other winners include guys like Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Derrick Henry. Blair, our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, called him the freak of all freaks. But when you hear those previous winners, just how transcendent of an athlete is Sammy Brown?
Emily, he's already being recognized as perhaps the best linebacker prospect of all time. His appearance obviously has drawn comparisons to Bryant. He's a freak in the weight room, a phenomenal talent, one that I'm sure we're all anticipating to see how high he is on that Andrew Ivins freak list for this 2024 class.
And not wait for that list to come out. Anna Adams from Clemson 24/7 joining us later in the show to tell us how adding Sammy Brown changes the trajectory for Clemson and Dabo Swinney. But first, you got four-star safety Marquise Gallegos is changing his trip to Notre Dame this weekend. He's still set to visit USC and Oregon a little bit later this month. But what's your read on what's happening here?
It tells me that the Irish must feel really good about where they sit in safety recruiting for this class. They've already got Kennedy Urlacher committed. He's the son of Hall of Fame linebacker Bryant Urlacher. They lead in the crystal ball for four-star safety Bronte Johnson. They're high on the list for a couple others, including Davis Andrews, who made it to South Bend this week. So at the moment, it looks good for the West Coast schools on Marquise Gallegos.
All right, let's go to the East Coast. Wake Forest lost one of its highest-ranked commits in its 2024 class as three-star athlete Marquise Barrett decommitted yesterday. What kind of player just hit the market?
A jitterbug receiver. He can blow past defenders to get open deep. He also does a lot of his work on underneath routes. He shows a great feel for filling out pockets of space and can really make things happen when he has the ball in his hands. He committed to Wake Forest just over a month ago, so it appears that he's ready to test the market once again.
Still a long ways to go for my hometown of Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, coming out of an official visit to Stanford, four-star quarterback Elijah Brown told our Greg Biggins that he will likely cancel his visit to USC. He's apparently seen enough from the California schools and will decide between Stanford and UCLA. A decision could come as early as next week. So where are you leaning for the highest-ranked uncommitted quarterback?
Emily, we follow the visits, and canceling that official right after taking an official to Stanford, you have to read between the lines, you have to connect the dots, you have to send out the smoke signal, whatever you want to call it. It spells good news for the Stanford Cardinal here in the chase for the nation's top uncommitted quarterback, who we're truly excited to see next week at the Elite 11 finals.
Whew, that would be a major win for a new head coach. All right, it's time now for the Wiltfong Whip Around with our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. And Steve, hopefully going to pop you up on screen here in just a little bit to remind the people that once again, I was left out of the memo to wear our black 24/7 polos, but that's all right. We'll power through. We'll start with five-star edge Colin Simmons. You reported earlier this week that he has quite a few summer trips set, both unofficial and official. The fun officially begins this weekend in Miami, but what's on the horizon for the rest of June and into July?
Yeah, after Miami, he's going to take an official visit to Alabama, and he also has an official visit to Texas for June 23rd. So that's Bama June 15th, Texas June 23rd. He also has an unofficial to return to Oregon June 20th, and an unofficial to get back to Texas A&M July 28th for their big end of the summer pool party bash that they host annually. And his mother, Monica McCarley, tells me that he wants to do some more officials during the season. She pinpointed LSU and Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon also got one of those official visits. Coming into these trips, I continue to like LSU. That's where my crystal ball is. I think they feel very comfortable in Baton Rouge, love the culture, love the staff, the program trajectory. Feels like home every time you talk to them about LSU. That's kind of what they say. Texas has been a mainstay near the top. Monica said that she loves the coaching staff at Texas. I know that Colin and her, they love Coach Sark. They love Coach Banks. They like the trajectory of Texas's program. They like it moving to the SEC. So Texas is another school that's been near the top of the list. And then look, this Miami visit is intriguing because the Hurricanes are literally on the short list for every major defensive line prospect in the country. Simmons is one of them. And Jason Taylor is a big reason why. Taylor impressed the family when he visited in the spring by watching Colin's film with him. An NFL Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever play the position, giving him feedback on what he could do better. And it's hard for Simmons to play much better with those 33 tackles for loss, 22 sacks, and 45 quarterback hurries en route to a state championship as a junior. But he believes that he can be coached up by Jason Taylor. So big visit for Miami this weekend, and more on the Hurricanes coming up later in this segment.
Maybe we anticipate a little Spider-Man meme with Jason Taylor if we want to go throwback with them. Another defensive prospect that's really elite right now, Aaron Scott from the state of Ohio. Steve, the number 3 rated corner in the country. He recently dropped a top 5. He's mapping out his official visits. He's got Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Tennessee high on his list. What's on the docket for him, Steve, beginning this weekend?
Yeah, he's at Oregon this weekend, Michigan next weekend, and then Ohio State to wrap up the month. And then I think he goes into decision mode. So those are the 3 schools that I'm looking at the closest here. Oregon's the dream school. He's excited to get back. He was there in April, but a lot of coaches weren't there because they were at the NFL draft. So he's excited to spend more time with them. He's already clicked with Coach Demetrius Martin. He thinks that's a guy that can develop him. Wants to learn more about the program, bringing his parents out there, and that's big as well. My crystal ball is on Ohio State for him. They get the last visit. They certainly have a great shot to land the number 1 player in the state, the chance to play for titles for a program that develops DBs at a high level and play in state. That's very exciting to him. But this is no slam dunk for the Buckeyes. As I've said on this show and on our message boards, I continue to believe Michigan's very much in it. And I could see Michigan winning this recruitment. Steve Clinkscale's done a fabulous job. Scott told me he's heavy on Michigan right now, and he feels like this visit will let him know if that's the gut feeling for the school to be the one he chooses or not. But he loves their defensive scheme, loves the way they press man, loves what they've done the last 2 seasons. Michigan has a great chance of winning this recruitment and beating Ohio State for a second time this cycle after landing running back Jordan Marshall earlier from Cincinnati.
I know Buckeye fans are waiting bated breath to hear more about Jeremiah Smith. That's something that we, of course, promote in the show, but I'm going to make you wait a second and ask you real quick to go ahead and hit that like button if you have not already. We have a lot of people watching the show, but less than half of you, I know, have hit that like button. It's so easy. It's going to be the easiest part of your day. Just go ahead, hit that tap. All right, it will be buzzing in Buckeye country this weekend. The headliner is Jeremiah Smith, the 5-star wide receiver. He is committed to Ohio State, but that has not stopped him from taking visits elsewhere. So, Steve, how important is this weekend for Ryan Day and Brian Hartline to really lock down this commitments and maybe allow the fans to take a deep breath?
Well, I feel like Jeremiah Smith views these official visits as something that he's earned the right to take through his hard work, to go through the process and get a chance to get wined and dined and go see some schools and take some officials. And so he took one to Georgia. He took one to Florida. Now he's back at Ohio State, program he's been committed to for a long time. And it's a school that checks every one of his boxes. Great relationship with Brian Hartline, program trajectory, great offense, receivers dominating in the NFL draft year in and year out. And until someone close to Jeremiah tells me that they think he's on flip watch, I'm not worried that he's going to leave Ohio State's class. Now, I will say anytime you take a visit, gives those programs a chance to make a pitch. There were people that spent time around him at Georgia that felt good about Georgia's chances long term. Certainly Florida, he's been there a couple times. and the Gators are fighting the good fight. And then you got Miami and Florida State in there as well. But Ohio State, I still like where they stand with Jeremiah Smith, the jewel of a terrific class so far.
The star power doesn't stop with Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State. They'll also host 5-star offensive tackle Brandon Baker and 4-star wide receiver Jeremiah McClellan, along with a couple others. Steve, where does Ohio State stand with these elite talents heading into their official visits?
Well, for Brandon Baker, 24/7 Sports #1 offensive tackle, I like where Oregon and Miami are positioned coming into this visit. He also has an official visit scheduled for Georgia later in the month per our colleague Greg Biggins. And Biggins talked with Baker after his last visit to Ohio State in the spring. So the Buckeyes probably in about that 3, 4, 5 position coming into the trip. We'll see what happens. But Baker told Greg on his last trip he really enjoyed his time there, the overall energy and atmosphere, spent quality time with the coaches, met some players, saw the stadium, did the campus tour. So looking to get back around Coach Fry and Coach Day and company, and certainly Ohio State's had a lot of success at that position in the NFL draft. So we'll see if they can make a move here. You know, Ohio State, I think they're in the top 2 for Daniel Cruz. He named his top 4 today. He was on campus last week. Texas is certainly the other program heavy in the mix. And then Gerby Lambert visiting next weekend, who I think Ohio State's got a great shot at, but they'll take their swing at Baker this weekend. And then Jeremiah McClellan, crystal ball favors the Buckeyes, was just at LSU. Oregon's in the mix. I think that Ohio State's closing in on putting the finishing touches on this receiver class that includes Smith, Mylan Graham. I like where they stand with good counsel receiver Elijah Moore. Now they have Jeremiah McClellan on campus this weekend. They'd love to close that one out as well.
Elsewhere in the Big Ten, Matt Rule and Luke Fickell hosted their first big official visit weekends in their respective new spots. So how did things go at Wisconsin and Nebraska?
Yeah, we talked a lot about USC and Clemson earlier in the week, rightfully so. Penn State got some buzz. But Wisconsin had as good a week as anyone in college football. They landed 4 commitments. They rise to number 15 in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings, and they're trending for several more visitors from what was like 16 official visitors on campus. But they landed offensive linemen Kevin Haywood and Ryan Corey out of the state of Pennsylvania, Vernon Woodward out of South Florida, and then defensive lineman Hank Weber from Tennessee. Those are program changers if you ask around Camp Randall Stadium. Yeah, I think that with Woodward, 6'2", 180-pound, physical defensive back that can play against the run. He's athletic, physical, checks all the boxes for what Wisconsin's looking for at the DB position. And Kevin Haywood's one of the jewels of the class. He's 6'8", 300 pounds, a big, long, athletic player that chose the Badgers over Auburn, Penn State, and USC, among others. I think he's a punishing blocker with good feet and twitch on film. And he's full of traits. I think he's a guy that could be instant impact for them, and they're counting on that. Corey is also a destructive interior offensive lineman that can play guard or center. Like the way he dominates at the point of attack and blocks at the second level and runs downfield. And then Weber could play a couple different positions for them on the defensive front. But moving forward, Darian Dupree is one of their most coveted players on the board. Running back from Chicago, Mount Carmel, 5'10", 195 pounds. I logged the 24/7 Sports crystal ball for Wisconsin. They're battling Illinois, Michigan, and Missouri. But ever since Luke Fickell and company got to Madison, they've targeted him as one of their most coveted prospects, regardless of position. I think it's really clicked for him, and he sees an opportunity with Braylon Allen and Ches Malusi leaving after the season, perhaps, to be an instant impact player for Wisconsin. And then Blair, help me with my man's name from Honolulu Farrington, 4-star edge. How do you say it?
Anelu Lafaele.
Well, you crystal balled him a couple days ago. I joined you today. His film is electric, man. Major pass rush ability, elite first step quickness. I think that Wisconsin is the one to beat for him alongside you and our Wisconsin insider, Evan Flood. And then one more guy I want to talk about is top 247 defensive lineman Benedict Ume, who also is high on Duke, Penn State, and Stanford, among others. He's one of the strongest players in the class, easily a 500-pound squatter. He's from Canada. He's also a terrific student. I think Wisconsin set the bar with his official visit. It was his first college visit with his dad. He loved the culture. He loved the coaches. And I think that Wisconsin is starting to trend for him going into his future official visits. And then Nebraska, they had some top targets on campus this weekend as well. Ja'Cory Barney out of Miami Palmetto. I have him crystal ball to the Huskers. A receiver that Andrew Ivins is high on, a twitchy guy with a lot of upside. That's Matt Rule's MO, developing guys with traits. led by assistant Evan Cooper. The Huskers are going hard in South Florida. Another that they're in good shape for is Amari Sanders from Gulliver Prep, who just played his first year at 50 tackles, 2 interceptions in 8 games. Also a double-digit scorer in basketball. And then Nebraska, they hosted several prospects from the Lone Star State. A name to highlight is Mario Buford, a defensive back who's going to announce his college decision in a couple hours. I like where Nebraska stands with him as well.
Yeah, Nebraska, Wisconsin coming off huge weekends. And when we're talking about big weekends, Steve, it's always reasonable to expect that Miami will be up there. You had Josh Pate out there this week. Messi is coming to Miami. You got the NBA Finals. Everything seems to be coming up Hurricanes right now. They've got a few 5-stars. Colin Simmons, we mentioned earlier. A few other defensive linemen and edge rushers will join him, including Dylan Stewart, David Stone, and Aiden Breland. How is Miami faring with these 3 5-stars, Steve?
Well, Jason Taylor, he's been NFL Defensive Player of the Year, been NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's a Hall of Famer. He has all the traits to be the best recruiter in the country. And it's resonating. His personality and resume is resonating with these recruits. And I think Dylan Stewart is coming off a good visit to Georgia. I could see Dylan Stewart in Miami's class. He was just in Coral Gables a few weeks ago. He's been there several times. He told me he's loving Jason Taylor. He's liking Coach Guidry's defensive scheme. Coach Cristobal's made an impact on him. And he talked about the great offensive line that Miami recruited last year. He'd love to go up against those guys in practice. And same with David Stone. David Stone raved about Jason Taylor, the chance to play for a Hall of Famer. So David Stone, coming off a good trip to Florida. You got Oklahoma, Oregon, and the Aggies in there for him. But Miami gotten him on campus several times this spring, and he's high on the Hurricanes. A lot of it to do with Jason Taylor. And then Aiden Breland, this is also a return visit for him. According to our Greg Biggins, he's got trips coming up to Georgia and Oregon, just coming off a really good trip to Texas A&M. But I get the feeling Miami's near the top of his list as well.
All right. In addition to Messi, Josh Pate, and the Nuggets, Miami will also host 5-star cornerback and current Georgia commit Ellis Robinson. Now, it's actually not his first trip to Coral Gables since committing to the Dogs. So I know you're shaking your head there. So are Dogs fans out there. How are Mario Cristobal and his staff doing to try and flip him?
Well, I was shaking my head in agreement. That's not his first trip.
No.
And if there's one school there's one school I'm watching to potentially flip him from Georgia, which I think is going to be very hard to do. Like, I think it's going to be hard for people to flip Jeremiah Smith. Nothing's impossible in recruiting. He's been to Miami a bunch. Him and his parents loved it when they were there earlier this spring. They're coming back this weekend for an official. And there's people around Miami that think that they have a great shot at him. And then his teammate, running back Jarrett Gibson's also going to be on campus, a return trip. I viewed Miami as the biggest threat to Texas. Texas getting an official at the end of the month. He had a really good official to Georgia last weekend, but Miami maybe hitting a potential home run with Jarrett Gibson this week. Miami, they're going to have a great class. They're a top 10 watch for sure. Maybe top 5 this weekend will have a lot to do with how far they go in the recruiting rankings when all said and done.
All right, Steve, before I let you go, we got a question from the chat here. So who is this? Kenneth Williams asking, any idea where Maryland stands with Aaron Childs, with him set to take an official to College Park this weekend?
Yeah, I think that they're on his short list, obviously, with him taking an official visit. But I love where Michigan stands with him. Michigan working on a top 5 class themselves, one of their top overall targets. I think Michigan's been the team to beat for a while. And that's how it sits going into the official visits. Florida also trying to make a push for Aaron Childs, but I think he's Michigan's to lose going into the officials.
All right, good to know. Thank you for that question. A reminder, the only way you can ask is if you subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel and also hit that like button like Steve Wiltfong is asking you to do. Steve, thank you so much. Be sure to read more of Steve's work online at 247sports.com. And for the really exclusive and juicy information that he provides, become a VIP member today. We are actually running a sale on annual memberships. You get 60% off for the entire year, or just $1 for your first month. And this will run through June 15th. A lot of moving and shaking in the ACC recruiting this week as Clemson firmly cements itself as the top class in the conference. Florida State, though, not far behind it, too, with 11 total commits. North Carolina and Pitt both with 14 in the cycle, and Wake with the most of any team in the ACC. Pretty impressive. Here's the bottom half, though, of the conference as it pertains to recruiting. At Georgia Tech, new head coach Brent Key, 8 players in the class. and the Virginias both with 7. Why am I rolling through the ACC recruiting rankings? Well, because it's time to give these classes some grades, so to help us do just that, let's welcome in national recruiting analyst Cooper Petagna. Coop, we're about to talk a lot of Clemson with Anna Adams in the next segment, so we're going to skip to Florida State. They're second in the ACC, but a top 10 team nationally. We know Mike Norvell loves him some portal, but that does not mean that he is ignoring recruiting. So what grade do you give the Noles?
I'm going to give Mike Norvell and the Seminoles an A. I mean, they've done a really good job. Listen, they've done all their work under Mike Norvell, really in the transfer portal, but they finished with a flurry last year. 5-star Hakeem Williams ended up in the mix for the Seminoles. They finished top 20 in the country at number 16. Right now, they're at number 9. That's where you want to be if you're a Florida State fan. At the top of that class, guys like Landon Thomas, 5-star tight end, the only tight end in the top 32, and a guy that they flipped from, guess who? The University of Georgia, back-to-back national champion. So that's a big one for Mike Norvell and company. But the real reason I love this class, Luke Kromenhoek, especially with the Elite 11 finals coming up next week in Los Angeles, this is one of those names to know. He committed in the spring of last year, 2022, and this was a guy who just kept climbing up our board, now in the top 64. And I think a guy who's got a chance, he's got the tools at the end of the day really to make a push for 5-star status. You add a couple names in like Cameron Davis, Luane McCoy. You got to love where Florida State is. You mentioned the transfer portal as well. They finished number 6 there last year in 2023. So you add that in there. This is kind of the combination right now for Mike Norvell that seems to be working.
Yeah, great response, obviously, with the new coaching changes in the state of Florida, and for the Seminoles to be recruiting the way they are is obviously super impressive. Let's move on to North Carolina, Coop, and this is a program who finished outside the top 25 in the 2023 recruiting rankings. They are now inside the top 15. What are your impressions so far of what the Tar Heels are building, and who are some standouts in Mack Brown's recruiting class?
Well, I gave them a B. This might be a little bit surprising if you're a Tar Heels fan, but as Emily alluded to, they already have 14 commitments, right? That's tied for second in the ACC with Pittsburgh, only behind Wake Forest, and they've done a really quality job. But if you look back to 2022 in Mack Brown, North Carolina, they finished number 11. They had 9 players that were top 247 signees. Last year, when they finished 28th, they didn't have any. Right now, as it stands in 2024, they don't have any either. So I think that top end of the roster building, that's where North Carolina needs to improve. Outside of that, they've done a really good job. Guys like Andrew Rosinski from the state of Georgia, a big 6'6", 275-pound plus tackle. He's got a background in track and field. You know we love that. Can work up to the second level. Really good athlete. I think that's a really good gift for the Tar Heels, as well as 3-star safety Jaden Patterson out of Mill Creek. This is a guy who can play corner. He can play safety. He's got some ability in the return game as well. So North Carolina, they keep doing what they're doing. I think they got a little meat left on the bone, and I think that's really important for Mack Brown. They got to take advantage of Drake May, who seems to be like he's going to be one of the first names to be called in the NFL draft next year. I know we're already talking about that already. So listen, they're in an okay spot. I think they need to close. They got some time to do it.
I just want to say, this is why we're doing grades in June, because you might look at a class and you go, oh, wow, top 15. They have 14 total players. Everything is good at UNC, but you take just a little step further and you pick up the magnifying glass and you realize that it's the quality that they're still looking for. So thank you for describing that so well. A top 10 class in 2023 for Miami, but as it sits now, the Canes just outside the top 25 with just 9 commitments. It is early, as I just said, but the expectations are, of course, high for Mario Cristobal. So what grade do you give the U?
I'm going to give Miami a B, and I might be taking it easy. I went back and forth between a B and a B minus, and right now Miami, listen, they brought Mario Cristobal in to do one thing, and that's recruit top-end talent. He certainly did that last year at Miami. There were double digits in top 247 signees. They finished inside the top 10 as well. Right now, they only have one top 247 commitment in receiver Chance Robinson out of St. Thomas Aquinas. Good news for them. It's a good one. That being said, Miami, where they stand right now, if my math is correct, they have over 40 official visitors left in the month of June. So I just think they're starting to get going. Mario Cristobal, he's known as a closer. drinks a lot of coffee, right? Coffee's for closers. So I think they're just starting to get going. But Chance Robinson, the guy that I alluded to earlier, really like him a lot. Big physical receiver. I expect Miami to get him involved in the red zone. They needed a guy like that after Robbie Washington and Nathaniel Joseph. They needed to add some size in that receiver room. Another guy, 3-star quarterback Judd Anderson. I got to see him in Atlanta this spring, and a guy that has some developmental upside that took Emory Williams last year as well. So that's a pretty interesting storyline if you're a Miami fan. Listen, they seem to be rolling the dice a little bit at the quarterback position, which could lend to after Tyler Van Dyke. Maybe they're in the portal, maybe not, but we'll see. Something to follow there.
All right, let's take a look at all of Cooper's grades here. Cooper, I said at the beginning of the show, I'm not sure if you caught it, that you're a tough grader. So I want to see the rest of those grades here. Actually, I think I'm just going to ask you another question before we get to those grades. There was one team that really stood out to you more than any, so I'm not going to tell the people the grades that you gave everyone. So first, Louisville was a team apparently that stood out to you. You gave them a B+. Will you explain that?
Yeah, I like Louisville a lot, and people might look at this and say, wait, how'd you get a B+? Well, they got 8 commitments, but right now, average rating per commit, they're number 2 in the ACC, top 3 in the ACC, right there with Florida State and Clemson. And they've done a really good job, especially in the state of Florida, which Louisville has a reputation to recruit well in that area. But really, TJ Capers, that's a guy that I look at, 4-star edge out of the state of Florida, a guy that can play on ball, off ball as well, an explosive, dynamic playmaker. Another guy that I like out of the state of Michigan, 3-star tight end Dylan Mesman, and this is a guy who plays with CJ Carr. We'll be calling his name a lot in Los Angeles, but big physical tight end. He's got a basketball background as well. Guys like Isaac Brown, as well as Deuce Adams, a quarterback. I think Jeff Brom's done a really good job, even though it's early. I like what Louisville's done, and I think you got to give him some credit.
Cooper, North Carolina State is a team that's used to being in the middle of the pack. No pun intended, or maybe it was intended. I don't know.
Let's take it.
But this is a program that right now is sitting 12th in the ACC, and they're outside the top 50 nationally. So how would you grade out this class so far? Who are some prospects that maybe that fan base should be optimistic about?
I gave them a C+. They only have 5 players committed right now. And you mentioned it. I mean, NC State is really not known as this juggernaut recruiting program, but I think they're capable of so much more. I think 18, 19, they finished right outside the top 25. Dave Doran's been there since 2013. They haven't had a top 25 recruiting finish under Dave Doran, but this is a team that's certainly capable of recruiting better. Good thing for NC State, the guys that they have in the boat, guys, you look at like Cedric Bailey from the state of Florida, big 6'6" signal caller out of Chaminade Madonna. He's the guy responsible to getting the ball to guys like Jeremiah Smith, number 1 receiver in the country, as well as Josiah Trader. This is a guy with a lot of developmental upside. I can see him climbing the board. 3-star cornerback Assad Brown out of the state of Virginia, 6 foot, 180 pounds, plays corner. I think he can project to safety, plays a little nickel. I love the position versatility there. So I like NC State. Listen, they have a formula. They are not really going to be worried about where they end up at the end of the day when it comes to recruiting rankings. They've been doing this for a while. Dave Doran has a recipe. I just think this is a team that can recruit better than what they've shown.
Okay, so C+ was the lowest score we've seen so far. Let's go ahead and show the rest of your grades. We showed a few teams, but you're not getting off the hook showing all of these teams here. Okay, so a lot of B's, a lot of room for improvement. I wonder if maybe there's some extra credit that's out there for some of these teams. It is hard to look past Boston College there with a D, but again, it is June, so there is definitely time. If you don't like your grade, if you're a school and you're watching right now and you don't like your grade, there is time. There's lots of time to make it better. But Cooper, thank you so much for making this show better and being on it. We appreciate it. If you have not already, come on, what are you doing? You got to be listening to the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. It is fantastic. It is starring Andrew Ivins and Cooper Petagna. New episodes dropping every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So easy to find. It is wherever you consume your podcasts.
It's cosmetic. These things are fixable. The tire's flat. The engine is not broken.
Dabo was all in on trying to win a national championship, and he still feels like he's one of the major players in college football, and he wants Clemson to be right back at the top of the mountain. He's tired of everybody talking about Florida State, and he's definitely tired of everybody counting Clemson out.
The heat has been turned up for a team that not too long ago won 2 national championships in a 3-year span. The last was won back in 2018, and then after missing out on back-to-back college football playoff appearances, it had some wondering what's going on with Clemson. Well, 2 days and 2 5-stars later, the Tiger vibes are certainly high. So let's peek into the future to see what this week could mean for the Tigers going forward as part of our Future Impact series. We're going to do that by welcoming in our friend Anna Adams from Clemson 24/7. And Anna, what a week it has been. First, 5-star Sammy Brown on Monday, and then 5-star wide receiver Bryant Wesco and 4-star wideout TJ Moore on Tuesday. So how can a week of wins like this create a domino effect for the rest of the cycle for the Tigers?
Yeah, I think you might have seen the biggest domino effect just happen, but what I'm excited to see as a recruiting reporter is what Clemson can do the rest of the cycle. A lot of the guys that they're in it for right now will continue to take their official visits, especially this month. A lot of them have visits lined up for the 3 remaining weekends in June, and then have a July or preseason decision on tap in order to decide before their senior seasons. So maybe you get a little bit of a run in that July, early August area. And then again, in the season, I think, too, when you see these guys, a lot of them are Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama guys that can get back to campus for a game this fall. And then maybe again in July when Clemson holds their All-In Cookout, which is another big marquee event this summer that the Tigers hold annually. I think you could see more jump on board then. But, yeah, for Clemson, it does tend to happen in waves just because they put so much emphasis on the recruiting events they have. They have less than arguably maybe some of the other premier programs out there, but with the ones they do, they go all out for them.
Meanwhile, Clemson firmly inside the top 10 of the recruiting rankings after a big week, a place that, was once very familiar, but not recently. Clemson has finished outside the top 10 for the past 2 cycles, but they're still winning double-digit games. They are fresh off an ACC title, but just how important are the recruiting victories for Dabo Swinney to finish among that nation's elite?
Yeah, I think it's probably less about the exact number where Clemson finishes, whether that's top 15, top 10, top 5, just because Clemson will take typically a smaller class than some of the other premier programs out there. Smaller classes, you've seen that going all the way back since before they've won their first national championship under Dabo Swinney. To me, it's more important for Clemson to get back to what their formula was when they did win 2 national championships, which was hitting on elite playmakers at quarterback, wide receiver, and edge or pass rush specifically. And I think over the past 2 classes, you're seeing Clemson really get back to that.
Yeah, good to see them back in those wide receiver sweepstakes. I know it's been a little bit, clearly a very successful visit weekend to kick off that month of June. So after the pair of 5-star wins this week, I hate to get greedy here, but who's some other uncommitted prospects from this past weekend that you're watching closely?
Yeah, someone that I think could possibly pop this month is top 247 cornerback Corian Gibson out of Texas, another Texas player. And there's maybe some Garrett Riley flavor there. He's on the defensive side of the ball, but it does not help, or it does not hurt to have Garrett Riley, who came from TCU, on Clemson's staff there. So he told me over the weekend after his official visit that he was undecided on if he would take the rest of his June official visits, which includes Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas, which leads me to believe that maybe he's thinking about shutting it down. But regardless, even if he does take those 3 official visits, he's set on making a July decision if he doesn't make one before, and I like Clemson's chances.
With wins like these, it definitely makes people forget, at least temporarily, about Dabo's, I'd say sometimes controversial portal usage. So how does the way that Clemson's currently recruiting maybe justify his decision to not bring in a bunch of transfers?
Yeah, well, if you're not going to use a transfer portal at all, then you better be sure that you're hitting on the guys that you're recruiting. And I think Dabo showed that this past couple of days, but you've got to continue that through the cycle. Specifically, I'd like to see Clemson land some of their top targets at offensive line. They do not have an offensive line commitment. They brought in 6 or 7 guys this past weekend, and they're right in it for pretty much all of them. But, who do they get over the hump with, and who can they land? And I don't think that this might be a controversial opinion, but I do not think that just because you're recruiting at a super high level that you can't ever use the transfer portal. I mean, we saw Clemson use it for a grad transfer quarterback this past cycle or this past offseason. But, I still think that there would be a room for edge or even wide receiver for Clemson to add immediate help. But, Dabo Sweeney wouldn't probably give you that same response.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Make sure you are reading her work at Clemson247.com for all the latest on Tigers football and recruiting. An exciting offseason so far for Clemson. A spring football league for high school players? Yeah, former USFL president Bryant Woods is trying to make that a reality. The Prep Super League will begin next year with a 6-week season going from mid-April to the end of May. It will operate independent of high school state athletic associations, giving players an opportunity to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And seeing as though this will impact high school athletes, we thought it would be helpful to get some perspective from a former high school coach. Here's National College Football analyst Carl Reed.
It's a high school league that's going to play in the spring, good for high school football players. Do 4 and 5 star guys need more exposure? I don't think they do. Guys that are 4 and 5 stars already have offers from everybody in the country. So exposure is not something that they need any more of. From an NIL standpoint, remember, NIL collectives are the ones who are paying all the money. Those collectives are attached to schools. There's not many guys getting a lot of deals off of the football field. Also, how much football can one guy play? Can a guy take 300 carries during the high school season and then come back in the spring and play another high school football season? We have to talk about, is that good for the athlete and good for his body? And finally, we knew when NIL started, when the transfer portal started, money brings strange bedfellows, and anywhere that there's money to be made, there's going to be a businessman that has his hands out.
Well said from our friend Carl Reed. Okay, so we got the high school football coach perspective. We really need maybe a recruiting analyst perspective. So look at this. We got Blair right here. Blair, what's your take on all of this? It sounds, I think to some people a little wild or a little exciting, or what's your read?
I want to rein it back in and just say that this is a terrible idea. I think the players are already, I think, in a way overworked, right? And when you think about their off season and their workouts and getting ready for their own high school seasons, and then you tack on a 6-week high school elite all-star league, it just doesn't really make sense. What if a player's already committed to a college and he decides to play in this? How will that college react, right? Like if a Jaden Davis says, "Oh, I'm going to play in this league," how do you think Jim Harbaugh is going to take that news, knowing that he's taking a Jaden Davis on campus in about a year with this extra mileage on his legs, on his arms, the risk of injury, all of that? I think is just, there's too much to risk there for the elite playmakers, the elite prospects and the recruits to take that into account when they factor in, okay, what's best for my future? Should I maybe hold off on competing in something like this? And obviously the NIL factor is a huge thing to consider. There could be some monetary gain, there could be branding opportunities, all that I think makes sense, but from a long-term outlook, I'm not sure this is the greatest idea.
Yeah, what do you expect the involvement to look like? If you have people like, we know Carl counsels a lot of high school athletes and they come to him for help. I know that you're in their ear as well and talking to them and also talking to these college recruiters. And if it seems like somewhat of a consensus as it's a bad idea, where do you see the involvement level from high school athletes?
I do think that it will benefit some players that maybe don't have those opportunities, right? I think Carl alluded to it. It could help maybe those prospects that do need the extra reps, the extra exposure, the extra tape. Maybe a player that didn't play as much as he wanted to the previous season, or someone that still feels like they need to improve their highlight reel to showcase to college coaches. But in the same regard, I don't know if that type of player is going to draw or is going to be able to have the benefits from the NIL or from this league in a way, right? So I think it has to draw the big names, but be a mixture of big name prospects with some players that still have a lot to gain. And then on the flip side, I think, maybe it could it could be a hindrance, or it could be something that doesn't benefit the elite playmaker, right? What if he maybe goes and plays in this league and then his stock drops a little bit because he decided to, play a bit more, or play those 6 extra weeks in the spring? I don't know if this is going to work out maybe the way the organizers are hoping that it works out, but it just seems like it's maybe too ambitious, too early, and there's got to be a way for something like this to work, but not in the spring, not when these players should be resting up and maybe preparing for their own high school seasons.
You hear that sound, you know that it's time to mark your calendar. Just because there's no college football recruiting show over the weekend does not mean that the recruiting world stops. So we want to make sure that you do not miss a thing. We are Commit HQ, and we are thrilled to host a commitment right here on the College Football Recruiting Show. Tune in Monday as 3-star wide receiver Jack Ressler will make his commitment live. The modern-day standout is deciding between Oregon, Oregon State, Penn State, Arizona State, and Boise State. Blair, what's the state of this decision?
He has been on a number of visits. If you track Jack Ressler on social media, or even see the reports that our own Greg Biggins has been writing for months, this is a player who is busy hitting the road and checking out these schools. It looks like the Oregon Ducks are in a really good spot there. He would be, I think, one of those weapons that they can use over the middle. He's a really tough receiver who can pick up yards after the catch. So I like the Ducks right now heading into this announcement.
Okay, looking forward to that. Meanwhile, we've laid this out. It's going to be a big weekend at the Shoe. Ohio State hosting top targets, including 5-star offensive lineman Brandon Baker and 5-star wide receiver commit Jeremiah Smith. Come Monday, Blair, what will be the biggest storyline out of this weekend?
I could have gone with Brandon Baker, and I could have said, hey, what's he going to say, right? What's he going to report back? What's the recap going to be about his official visit to Ohio State? Have the Buckeyes made up enough ground on Miami and Oregon to be considered a top contender? But I'm going to go with Jeremiah Smith and what he's going to tweet out on Sunday after his official visit. I'm expecting an emoji, just one emoji, and I'm expecting it to make waves because this is a player who's gone to social media before to make statements, and I think Buckeye fans want to know, is the process over for Jeremiah Smith in the middle of June?
It'd be a dangerous emoji. I'm picturing the eyeball, so we just have no idea what's going to happen there. We do know what's going to happen next week. The Elite 11 Finals kicking off next Wednesday. We'll be bringing you live coverage of it all week long. The headliner is Dylan Raiola, but give me an early prediction, Blair. Who's going to steal the show?
The last left-handed quarterback, Emily, to take home the MVP at the Elite 11 Finals is Tua Tagovailoa, and I like another left-hander to make some noise in Los Angeles next weekend. Air Noland, you see him right there. He wowed at the regional. He earned the invite straight from the regional, and I think he's a player that's been skyrocketing up recruiting boards. So give me Air Noland as a player that's going to make waves at the Elite 11 Finals. The Ohio State commit continues to rise and continues to showcase his abilities.
We're rolling through some highlights of the quarterbacks that will be there, 20 of them participating in Elite 11 Finals. Excited to see what happens there. All right, it's time now for some viewer questions. You guys have submitted a lot today. Thank you so much for that. I hate to ask more of you, but you know I'm going to. Make sure that you have hit that like button. We love to hear from you, and that spreads the word, tells other people to come watch our show. So go ahead and smash that little thumbs up. Let's ask our first question from an H. Glenn asking, Blair, is USC out of luck at quarterback in 2024?
I don't think so. I think they're going to be just fine. Sure, they've missed out on Dylan Raiola twice, and that's the fight on or the victory or whatever.
Oh, that was rude.
It's 2 times now that they've missed out on Dylan Raiola. They missed out on DJ Lagway when he committed to Florida, and now it looks like they're on the outside looking in for Elijah Brown, who has canceled his official visit, and everything's pointing to the Stanford Cardinal for the 4-star quarterback for modern day. But I still think that Lincoln Riley can go out and be in the market to flip someone. We've seen it time and time again, a quarterback that rises late, a quarterback that makes noise at the Elite 11 Finals, a quarterback that has a tremendous start to his senior season, suddenly gets a ton of exposure, maybe committed to a lower Power 5 program or a school that maybe isn't doing so hot on the field, and that will give Lincoln Riley an opportunity to pounce. And if that doesn't work out, you see Caleb Williams and what he's doing there on the screen, the Heisman pose. That's the ultimate factor for USC when it comes to quarterback recruiting. Caleb Williams was a transfer. If that doesn't work out in high school recruiting, he can go back into the transfer portal and get a player that's going to compete against Malachi Nelson come next spring. Because when you look at the Big Ten schedule now, Emily, it just was released for the 2024 class or for the 2024 season. They open the season against LSU in Vegas. They've also got to play Ohio State. They've got to play Michigan. They've got to play at Penn State. I mean, this is going to be a loaded schedule, and with a new quarterback, I would expect Lincoln Riley to go into the portal if he doesn't hit a home run in 2024 quarterback recruiting.
Yeah, as we have seen time and time again, Lincoln Riley has had success finding quarterbacks in the portal even before he got to USC. Also, it is June, and the amount of times we've talked about players who were once committed this time of year but decommitted and flipped elsewhere. That's why we have the spatula season late in the fall for a reason. So this thing is far from over, but I can understand why USC fans might be asking you that question, like, what's going on here? Next question here from JR338. Anything going on with linebacker Kingston Viliamu Asa?
It's funny that you asked. He's got an official visit coming up this weekend to USC. So the Trojans are dominating right now the Q&A section. It's almost 3 o'clock on the West Coast, so maybe that's where our fan base is right now. But yeah, he's going to visit the local school. He's going to get up to Heritage Hall in LA and check out the Trojans and give the USC fan base an opportunity, I think, to make a really strong impression. He's been there a number of times. He feels really comfortable. He's supposed to be on campus with his close friend and teammate Peyton Woodyard, who's already committed to Georgia. They will be in LA together. He's also set to officially visit Notre Dame in a couple weeks, and then he'll wrap up his official visits to Ohio State at the end of June. And according to our own Greg Biggins, Emily, I'm a prop guy. It sounds like the Ohio State Buckeyes are making a lot of noise and have a lot of the buzz right now for Kingston Viliamu Asa when it comes to his recruitment heading into what looks like a summertime decision.
Where did you pull that from? I feel like all your props are behind you. That was sneaky. That was impressive.
Well, in fairness to being really upfront with you, I had pulled this out when I was going to talk about Aaron Noland, but I just didn't have a chance to pull it out.
Okay, well, it's perfect that we got that question. So thank you for asking that. All right, we're about to say goodbye, but to all of my hoops fans out there, do not move a muscle. 4-star big man Tyler McKinley is set to announce his college decision at 6:30 Eastern right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. He has 7 finalists. You see them below. I'm not going to say them all, but we will automatically direct you to it, so you don't have to do anything. You just stay right here, and you will automatically go and see where our man Tyler McKinley will be playing his college ball. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.